Hello, and welcome to another edition of No Lights Paranormal, where three nerdy paranormal investigators sit down and discuss spooky stories from the web. My name is Joe, I'm the lead investigator.
My name is Teresa, and I am your researcher.
My name is Alex, and I am the equipment setter-upper and Baba Yaga enthusiast of the group.
Yes, you are. Sorry, I was actually reading. I had no way to segue that.
It's true.
So yeah, doing a little bit of an interesting topic tonight. So let's get into spooky news, and then we'll jump into it.
So actually, as far as spooky news goes, I do not have anything that I really want to hit on because everything that was going on last week is still going on this week.
Okay.
These are, things that are just sort of carrying on different dates once every week throughout the entirety of the month.
So no spooky news updates.
No big updates. Nope. You can still get into all of the spooky old buildings from all over the whole U.S. And you just, you pave it and you go. Yeah.
It does get fairly repetitious at certain points. When you're in our field, there's not
a whole heap going on, but what there is good stuff. You got the Mansfield Reformatory, you've got Madison Seminary, you've got things further down south. You've got, I believe that the Newport Memorial Building in Newport, Tennessee recently opened up for paranormal investigations over Halloween. Hopefully, they will continue to do more and become more open and more of a public, because that place is amazing. We've been there. I don't know if it's still referred to as the Memorial Building, but for those of you who don't know, it's the Cobb County Memorial Building. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful little place. Was once the staging area for a very unfortunate event when a plane crashed not super far away in a field. And
they didn't really have a place to put anything.
Yeah. Well, the morgue was just not big enough to handle all of that. So the gymnasium in the schoolhouse became the morgue, basically.
I mean, to be fair, that place is a lot less of a schoolhouse. And think of it more as you remember the old gym that used to be on the Wadsworth High School where you could just go Steiner's, where it was
Steiner's building.
So this place is. It's almost like a church in the fact that there's kind of small classrooms around it, but it's mostly just the gym.
Okay, I got you.
They do plays there and stuff
really
like that.
Nice stage area with a back and a front and a side for the stage area. It's actually pretty cool.
They do plays and it's kind of like a basketball gym. There's a basketball court there too, and that's about it.
Yeah. No, I remember I've been there a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really great place and haunted as all get out. We had some amazing experiences there. So, yep, not a whole heap as far as paranormal news goes.
All right. So before we get too far into it, I want to preface this by saying, A, we're never super family friendly to begin with, but B, I would listen to this one before I let your kids listen to this one. I'd put your kids to bed for this one because it's a weird, touchy subject.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are actually this week covering paranormal possession, spiritual possession, and things of the possession nature.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to mention, actually, as far as it goes, this was published December 11th, so 3 days ago. Bobby Mackey's Music World in Weiler, Kentucky is no more. It has been demolished.
Oh, so that was the news that you didn't tell during the news segment.
Yes, apologies. I had actually completely forgotten. But yeah, Bobby Mackey is one of the most famous places in the region as far as hauntings go. It was covered on, every show from every paranormal group ever, really. Yep, it was demolished.
We drove right past it on Ezra's first road trip of his life.
Indeed. So, yep, Bobby Mackey's is gone.
Bye.
I believe that they are rebuilding. I do not know if it will be on the same chunk of land or not.
Don't know. They don't really talk to me, so.
Not so much.
All right.
So, yeah.
We are probably going to be covering some controversial topics. I know at least I am.
Controversial, darker end of the spectrum. Not
really family friendly.
Super
child friendly, we should say.
Yeah, I wouldn't say not family friendly, just not young kid friendly.
Right. So yes, put the kiddies to bed Or if you're sensitive to type such topics, definitely
Go ahead and take yourself to
I hate to lose you, but yeah, I probably would skip the listen on this one if you're sensitive to those kind of things.
It is your option to sit this one out. It's
Yes.
fine. We'll be back next week with a different topic that we'll figure out by next week.
Promise
Yes.
I won't be mad at you if you don't listen to this one.
Yeah. So, with that being said,
Yes, with that being said, I have actually decided that I am going to cover a rather famous paranormal experience. First off, I would like to introduce you to the Smurl family. The Smurl family consisted of Jack, his wife Janet, and they have 2 children, daughters. One of them, they don't give a whole lot of information about the daughters because even in that time, which was like during the 70s and 80s, it was not practice to really talk too much about the ages of underage children and things like that. So the guess is that the girls were, one of them was probably in her very early teenage years, and then the other one was probably, 9 to 11, something in that nature. Anyway, so the story of the Smurl haunting is actually based on a real life experience. The haunting, and it was allegedly a demon possession that they encountered when they had moved into a new home in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. It's one of the most well-known and controversial hauntings that have ever been investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, of course, everyone in the paranormal field pretty much knows who Ed and Lorraine Warren are. Fairly famous paranormal investigators, written books, done a lot of interesting things. But to get on with the story, in the early 70s, the Smurl family, Jack, his wife Janet, and their 2 girls, moved into a charming, modest home on Case Street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. The house was located in a quiet residential neighborhood. It seemed like absolute perfect place for a fresh start. Had very spacious rooms, had a large backyard. It was absolutely everything they could hope for. But their dreams of suburban bliss quickly turned into nightmares. Shortly after moving in, the family began to notice some strange occurrences. Small things at first. Doors would creak open by themselves. Objects seemed to move or disappear without explanation. Foul smells came from absolute nothing. Bone-chilling cold spots randomly would appear and disappear throughout the house. So what started out as oddities pretty soon escalated into some pretty terrifying events that would really become the stuff of local legend. It didn't take real long for the Smurls to realize that something was very, very wrong in their new home. Started in the air. The house, despite being very well maintained, always had sort of an oppressive, sour odor to it. At first, they thought that it was the plumbing or maybe like the heating system, but no matter how much they cleaned, the smell was still this like weird, stale, pungent odor that just never went away. Then came sounds. At night, Jack and Janet would lie in their bed listening to footsteps, or what sounded like footsteps, moving back and forth through the attic above them. And it wasn't like an occasional creaky floorboard. It was a very distinct, rhythmic, walking back and forth footstep. The sound would often grow louder. At times, they would even hear scratching, like claws dragging against the wood above them. But it wasn't just the house that was affected. So one night, their eldest daughter, Heather, came running into their room, screaming that something had grabbed her foot while she was laying in bed. When they investigated, they found absolutely nothing there, but the terror in her eyes was pretty unmistakable, so they knew that something really had happened. They just weren't sure what. The family tried to dismiss it, thinking maybe she had a bad dream or something, but the events became increasingly difficult to ignore. Over the course of the next few months, these disturbances actually grew more violent. Janet reported hearing strange guttural growls coming from within the walls. Furniture began to move on its own. A couch would shift clear across the living room floor on multiple occasions. Chairs got knocked over, lamps would be knocked over, and it was just, the objects were just not just kind of disturbed, like moved here or there, just little bits. They were like picked up and violently thrown across rooms. It escalated to the point where Janet, in particular, the wife, she reported being attacked by an unseen force, leading to her to exhibit a lot of symptoms that kind of became indicative with what possession is, like scratches on her body that didn't belong and nobody knew where they came from. She would speak in different voices and different tones and even different languages that there's no way she could have known. And she displayed some pretty crazy supernatural strength. But the most frightening incident occurred one evening when Jack, the father, was home alone. He was sitting in the living room watching TV. Suddenly there was this crazy chill in the air, as if it was winter and somebody left a window open or something. So he kind of looked up, glanced up, and he saw this real dark, shadowy figure standing in the doorway of the room. At first, he thought maybe it was Janet or one of the two girls, but it didn't move. It stood stock still, just staring at him. He stood up and went to approach the figure to kind of investigate a little better, and it absolutely vanished. The cold spot in the air definitely stayed, and Jack got filled with this crazy, overwhelming sense of like dread and danger. The Smurl family didn't know where to turn. They had heard rumors about the house being haunted, but they completely dismissed them all when they moved in. Now, though, it seemed that those stories were definitely true and these guys were living a bit of a nightmare. They're pretty desperate, so they ended up reaching out to Ed and Lorraine Warren. At the time, they were the two most well-known paranormal investigators ever, really. They'd handled a whole lot of real famous high-profile cases by that time, like the Amityville Horror and the Enfield Poltergeist. So they, at this point, were at their peak. They were very, very well-known. When they arrived at the Smurl home, they immediately sensed that something was wrong. Ed, being a demonologist, and Lorraine being sort of a psychic medium, she said, that she most definitely felt something. It was not good. Ed said that the atmosphere in the house was very, very oppressive, filled with sort of an almost suffocating darkness. They were able to detect the presence of a powerful entity that they claimed was a malevolent spirit, or perhaps far worse, like demonic, that was lurking within the house. They conducted several investigations and found evidence of paranormal activity, including those strange cold spots, unexplained noises, and, of course, the disturbing apparitions like the black figure that was in the sitting room. But what got them most worried was the violent energy that seemed to permeate the house. It wasn't just a ghostly presence. It was something way more dangerous than that. Lorraine fully believed that the house was inhabited by a demon, and she warned the Smurl family that they were in pretty grave danger. Past that, situation got even worse. Janet, the wife, became the primary target of the entity. She began experiencing unexplainable physical symptoms, severe headaches, bouts of dizziness, moments of complete paralysis. She would sometimes find herself overcome with a deep sense of despair and terror, even though it wasn't anything to be afraid of. She almost felt like something was trying to take control of her mind. One evening, Janet experienced something pretty crazy. She was sitting in the living room with Jack, and she felt this crazy, violent pressure on her chest, as if someone had, put hands on her chest and had just pushed really, really hard, almost struck her. She was gasping for air, totally unable to breathe. Her body started trembling, and she felt like this invisible force was deliberately attempting to strangle her. Her eyes rolled back in her head. She let out this crazy, growling, low, icky sound. Her voice was no longer her own. It was a deep, menacing tone, like it came from the depths of hell itself. Jack, of course, was absolutely terrified. It wasn't until the family members began hearing the entity speak in different voices, sometimes it would speak like a man, sometimes a woman, sometimes even a child, they realized that the situation had truly become dangerous. The demon could take on multiple voices, and it used them to confuse and manipulate the family. But it wasn't just Janet who was affected. Jack was also harassed by the entity. One night, he found himself pinned to the bed by an invisible force, totally unable to move. He felt something very heavy pressing down on his chest, like literally squeezing the life out of him. He attempted to scream, but absolutely no sound came out of his mouth. With the Warrens' guidance, the Smurl family decided that an exorcism was the only way to get rid of the demonic presence in their home. Ed, of course, being trained as a demonologist, knew that this was not going to be a simple case. The entity had become pretty powerful, feeding off of the fear and the suffering of the family. On the night of the exorcism, along with the Warrens, they all gathered in the living room. As the ritual began, Janet actually became violently ill. Her eyes rolled back, she was sweating, she was clammy, her skin went pale, she was convulsing. The entire room went ice cold, and this house seemed to almost groan like it was under the weight of, something crazy big. Yeah. For hours, they prayed, they burned incense, they used blessed objects to try to drive the demon out. Janet was screaming, her voice contorted into these like crazy sounds and demonic noises, and the entity just fought back at all this stuff with crazy violence, throwing furniture clear across rooms. Walls were shaking to the point that pictures were falling down. Just crazy shit all around them. After hours and hours of this pretty intense struggle, Janet just simply collapsed onto the floor. And the house kind of went still and quiet. So at that point, they were able to kind of regain control of their house and their lives. But, I mean, obviously the aftermath of something crazy like that definitely lingers. The house on Chase Street was just no longer peaceful or comfortable to them. The trauma of it had left some pretty deep emotional scars. And they found themselves completely unable to shake that feeling that the demon could return at any time. So the Smurl family did remain in the house in the following years, but it wasn't the same. Janet continued to suffer from some pretty severe health issues, a lot of which she believed to be directly tied to sort of whatever the demon had done to her during the possession. Jack was having basically PTSD and horrible nightmares about the whole situation. It was just all bad. But the big thing is, like, is this some psychological trauma amplified by fear and the suggestion of Ed and Lorraine Warren? Because, they really did love their comeuppance, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they were, hey, write books about me. Constantly. I'm not saying they were fake. I'm not saying they didn't have real gifts. But they loved their publicity. Loved.
Makes sense.
So to this day, the Smurl haunting remains honestly one of the most chilling accounts of demonic possession here in the U.S. There are various books, various media, and the haunting is still pretty widely discussed anytime somebody starts talking about possession, like we're doing here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the poor people were like literally scarred for the rest of eternity because of all that shit. Like, I mean, when you're standing in your living room and you have paintings and pictures flying off the wall and lamps flying across the room, that's some scary shit.
Huh? I mean, that's possession and poltergeist, kind of the scariest kinds of paranormal thing you could ever come across.
I agree wholeheartedly. So, yeah, that is my story of the Smurl family from Pittston, Pennsylvania.
Nice.
All right. Well, how do we put this? For once, Joe actually requested to go last.
Yeah.
So I guess that brings it to me, in which I will go ahead and lead off by saying that I will be assuming full responsibility for this topic this week. I'm surprised that I didn't get more surprise inquisition from my two colleagues here, only because, how do I put this? So, anyway, I guess the simplest way to put it is that I'm not the demon guy, not the possession guy.
True. Which is why I didn't offer any countenance to counteract your thing.
Right.
Like, oh, okay. All right. You want to go with that? You must got something good. Let's go.
So for me, I have one micro story. One story, you know what? I'll just get into it. So the thing that led me into this topic was I had recently been watching, like, reading articles, and I'm watching interviews and doing this. And as you two are well aware, a pretty big fan of the band Whitechapel, right?
Yeah.
So I was looking into things, as I usually do when I rabbit hole into things that I'm interested in. And there are pretty open and honest articles about the lead singer's mom. And there's some weird correlations. So his parents both passed away by the time he was 15.
Okay.
Again, I am not groundbreaking any information. This is all out there on the interwebs to find. He has been open and honest in articles about this. And they wrote 2 albums about the whole ordeal, getting over it.
Okay.
His dad passed away when he was 10. In 95, he died from cardiac arrest, which likely the inducing reasoning behind that, the underlying condition would be scleroderma, which is like a thickening and hardening of like the arteries and things like that.
Yeah.
Super not that common, but apparently he was generally a healthy guy. And one day he was walking on the stairs and his older sister's boyfriend was walking behind him. He hit the bottom step and just hit the floor. And later that day he was gone. And that was it.
That sucks bad.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, his dad was a communications guy for the Navy. He was basically an audio engineer.
Okay.
Which is entertaining to me,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah.
So in 95, December 30th is when his dad passed away. And at that point, despite her prior struggles with alcoholism, there had been no issues out of his mom whatsoever. He rants and raves about them. Amazing, great parents, very loving parents, no abuse, no neglect, nothing like that. But his dad apparently had been the rock to hold the whole thing together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because as soon as he passed away, his mom pretty much spiraled out.
Yeah. It was just familiar in families.
So she ended up remarrying about 2 years later. He goes on to be quoted in an article saying that he didn't think that it was out of love. He thought it was out of desperation, and she just met the wrong person. That person got her addicted to crack cocaine.
Yeah.
And within 3 years, she passed away. She OD'd. He said that he remembers that he was in school when it happened, and he kind of felt nothing and just wasn't surprised. Like, they were kind of just waiting for it to happen. They knew this was the road it was going.
That is so incredibly sad.
For a 15-year-old to say, that's
oh, man.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that said, one part that I found interesting is that, so their one album that was titled The Valley, there's a lot of work and there's songs in there that were influenced by stuff that he found in his mom's journal.
Okay.
His mom at some point between 90 and 95, or wait, was it 95? No, between 95 and 2000 when she passed away, was diagnosed with DID.
Okay.
That's harsh.
She has a journal with over 34 confirmed different handwriting styles.
Oh.
34 different voices in her head, and one of those was very often speaking of and pleading with a demon referred to as Merkul.
Oh, sorry,
Okay.
I'm going to stop for just a second, but a lot of people don't know what DID is. It's dissociative identity disorder. It's what used to be referred to as multiple personality disorder. So obviously it's a health condition that you can't control it. It's just unfortunately a mental health thing.
And to be fair, he also has said in different interviews that I've since reading the article, watched, and like it wasn't just in the journal. So like the journal itself it's an interesting aspect to me because he would say that the handwriting changed from page to page and person to person.
Wow.
As well as like the way that it was written. He's like, but also like there are some times that you would talk to her and she would be like childlike, and there are other times where she would be somebody else, and and people need to take a minute and like realize like what it would be like to live with that, where it's not a movie.
Yeah.
I wonder if she was, under the care and treatment of any sort of a physician, or if she had gone untreated and ended up, just reverting to substance abuse because of the symptoms.
Quiets the voices.
Right, quiets the voices.
So some things on that. If so, I don't know for how long. And that's not really something that was gotten into.
Well, he was pretty young. He may not honestly know.
May not honestly remember. Like, that's also a fair assessment. But yeah, so it's one of those things where, in my own morbid curiosity, fascination sort of way, I would love to be able to see what the hell was in these journals.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's just, sorry, no offense, that's just me. Like,
no, I get it.
There's a morbid curiosity there, like that.
Yeah.
Just okay. Like I would like to see inside the mind of a person like this.
Yeah.
For my own scientific reasoning.
That would
Same.
be interesting. It would be interesting.
You know what I mean?
Well, I want to see the flip.
Yeah.
Like what?
And I'm curious,
For
what
me-
are the triggers for the flip?
That's where I was going with it. For me, it's more of like, for you, the scientific, and I don't mean to cut you off because I know you got a story, but it's also the flip on it, like what caused it to change and stuff. So yeah.
Right. But yeah, so no, like as far as like super details, couldn't tell you. What I can tell you that I did find interesting is where she passed away in 2000, which was before we moved to Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
But she is buried in one of the cemeteries that we quite often frequented. So outside of when we went to Old and Gray, the other big one that was over by like Donna and Pee Wee's house, like off 40,
Mm-hmm.
that's where she is buried.
That's amazing. Actually, we were there a lot.
But nevertheless, so hearing the entire story of what she went through / what he went through, all in the same kind of token, is kind of what made me curious, and it sent me into my own weird little rabbit hole spiral.
Yeah.
And I started looking into the correlation between DID and possession.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I see where you're going with that.
And one thing that I would like to point out that is outside, the first thing that I found outside of a correlation between DID and possession itself is that there is literally a clinical diagnosis called PTD. And what that is possession trance disorder.
No. Okay, you're going to have to read into
That's
that one a little
unheard
further.
of. Oh, I've never heard of it. I shouldn't say unheard of.
I mean, to be fair, literally, I Googled correlation between DID and possession, and the first article that I popped up literally says it was an article called Trapped Between Theological and Medical Notions of Possession, a case of possession trance
That is-
disorder with a 3-year follow-up.
Hilarious, because that kind of ties in what I'm talking about, but go ahead.
All right, so what I'll do is I'll go over a little bit of this case study in particular, then I'll cut it to you, and then we'll discuss at the end. Like I'll say, because I have a lot of questions, and
Same.
I feel like there's a lot of banter, the back and forth that can be done here.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a correlation between all of this.
I think so as well. So it's just one of those things that I'd like to talk about, but So yeah, let me go ahead and cut into this story, and then I'll
Go ahead.
cut over to that. So the story, the case study that I'm going to read about, a little bit of the story, I'm going to pick pieces and parts. The whole thing is fairly long, so I'm not going to read 26 pages of works to get through to the points that I can do in like 10, 15 minutes. So this case study was about a 42-year-old woman named Emma. Well, who they referred to as Emma. We don't know the real name, obviously,
right.
and there's like HIPAA laws that prevent that being done. She had a secondary education, meaning she did at least complete some college, was divorced, and raised by herself a 10-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son with autism spectrum disorder. She remained unemployed and used care allowance. Emma came from a religious family and was raised by her mother and grandparents. No one used psychiatric treatment in her mother's family, and there was no information about her father's side. Her father was born in a Nazi concentration camp.
Ouch.
So,
right off the rip.
like, listen, if it feels like there's going to be a problem mentally in any, that's not even me poking the bear. That's just like, if it feels like this is just a lineup for disaster, that's how it goes.
Ding.
Sorry.
So, to kind of start the story, theme 1, excitement and guilt for crossing the taboo. Emma remembered being introduced to sex when she was 6, secret games with her 10 years older cousin.
Jesus.
Triggered excitement and pleasure, and at first she didn't think of them as harmful. It was only while preparing for her first communion that she learned during confession that it was forbidden, shameful, and sinful.
Yeah.
In her own words, it started when I was 6. It influenced me because it woke me up too soon and made me sexually licentious later on. I have never talked about it. It was during my confession that I admitted playing immodestly. The priest wasn't satisfied and wanted to know the details. He asked who it was with, but she wouldn't tell him, and she's always taken the blame for it.
Wow.
In secondary school, it goes on to state that she repeatedly broke the rules and urged boys to masturbate in class. This excited her and could also make her feel like she had control over their sexuality. She goes on to say that she ignored her teachers and showed them that she did not care. She was promiscuous, and she sat on the last bench with the boys and forced them to masturbate.
All right. $5.
Theme 2, seeking revenge on priests. So in Emma's mind, the church forbade expressing sexual desire and commanded abstinence by inducing guilt, shame, and sin. Some priests, like her older cousin when she was a child, both aroused her and were experienced as forbidden targets. She recalled an early exorcism. In her own words, these men were holding me face down on the floor. The priest sat on the back of my legs. He kind of lay down on me, holding my hands. He started stroking my hair, saying to accept this love of Christ, and my body reacted against all reason. I also felt discomfort because something happened to me. For the first time, I realized that I never thought about a priest before in that way. Looking at the priest, even a handsome one, she had never seen a priest as a man before, but someone as asexual. However, after the exorcism, she had erotic thoughts about him for 2 weeks.
That's wicked.
Wait, hold on. At the beginning, when this was happening with the priest, was he doing something sexual to her, or was he trying to like exorcise her or something?
It was referred to as an exorcism.
Okay.
Whether you can think of the act of holding one down in twisted fashion to
Right.
That's
I just want to clarify that for my own purposes.
Totally understand. I wish I had more clarity, but
Yeah, I get you.
So, in order to deal with conflicting feelings, she was seeking men who introduced themselves as priests, engaging them in sex chats, and exchanging pornography, subsequently seeing them as equally sinful. So,
Okay.
literally what she would do is she set up a profile in an online website. The name of the profile was Lady for a Priest. They started contacting her, and it was, in her own described words, it was revenge on her part for them making her feel shame that she...
It's not entirely unheard of, yeah.
Mhm.
So that was a weird thing. Theme 3, possession form presentations. And this is kind of where her spiral starts spiraling out. And possession form presentations attract public attention. So Emma learned from her participation in religious youth camps that unusual behavior, which group members ascribed to possession, evoked awe and interest and could lead to receiving special attention from some adolescents.
Yeah.
So she said that she got involved in the Oasis movement when she was 15 and was encouraged to participate in a so-called community day, kind of preliminary meeting and excursion. There were 3 other girls who were acting weird. One started having convulsions while singing. The priests surrounded her and they were in a tight circle so that no one could see what they were doing. Emma said that she was really curious and wanted to see what was happening, and since she couldn't break through, she crouched to the side and said, "Satan, if this is your doing, leave her and enter me. I remain at your disposal."
Shit.
At this point, she had lost her temper. This was the first time that Emma's disruptive behavior was accompanied by derealization and convulsions. She later compared the state to feeling dizzy, as if riding on a merry-go-round. Emma remembered being given tranquilizers, which had a delayed effect. She emphasized that this was unusual, which for herself and witnesses could have justified the supernatural causation of her state. She saw the youth camp experience as a turning point in her life, leading to further problems. Since then, let's see here. She says that it was like being on a merry-go-round carousel. My clothes were torn. I fell on stones. The priest went on praying over that girl, and after a while, she calmed down. I calmed down too while we continued walking, but after a few meters, I lost my temper again. It was awful. They called an ambulance. They gave me sedatives, but it had no effect. A priest said that it was a dose for a horse, and it didn't work on him. It was only when the doctor took me to the ambulance away from the priest that I fell asleep immediately and deeply, so deeply that it was difficult to wake me up later.
Well,
I mean, it sounds to me like she probably started life with a pretty clear-cut case of compulsive sexual behavior disorder. Hypersexuality, if you will. It's brought on by things like dissociative disorders, and
which could also be let's be honest with you, it could also be a very big impact from things like sexual abuse when you're...
Yeah, 100%. That's another thing I was going to say.
I mean, sexual abuse would go as far as to probably cause, in a lot of cases, people to start suffering from a DID type symptom state.
Absolutely.
Which it's a domino effect, really, right?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's super. It's a really uncommon thing, but it's very common in people who have had sexual or physical abuse, shitty impaired family relations, emotional or behavioral problems. Anyhow, dissociative identity disorder is a big one. Post-traumatic stress disorder is another big one. Yeah. That's it might have started out that way, or I should say maybe the mental illness presented in that way in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then just sort of everything went wrong from there, because not only was she not receiving care, but people were trying to hold her down and perform exorcisms on her because of a mental disorder that she can't control, which of course spiraled it way the fuck out of hand.
Well, it in a way gave credence to it.
Yeah.
It gave validity to it.
That's
so
fucked up.
What I'll say is, this is where, at this point, because I don't know what Joe's story is about, these are just big points that I wanted to hit on for later on when we do get to have a discussion. Again, as Joe has some kind of interesting story going on, you can now see why we were kind of arguing over the last slot. Like, all right, well I got a lot to talk about after this.
Oddly enough, it kind of goes hand in hand. But I want to start by foremost saying this. The story I'm going to read is it delves into some very controversial things. And I will start by saying the disclaimer of this is in no way, shape, or form the views of No Lights Paranormal. I feel safe in saying that for you too. We don't necessarily believe in what this speaker is talking about. It delves into some subjects that is modern day.
I will confirm this by saying that I cannot believe in what the speaker is speaking about because I don't even know what Joe's about to say.
You will learn. However, this is from the Harvard University.
Probably don't agree with him already. That's fine.
It was a topic of discussion that a speaker came to the college and was actually talking about it. It actually took place on April 4th, 2024. The speaker talks about jinn and their possession of Islam, specifically Islam women. And the speaker goes on. Now, mind you, it's the full transcript, so it's a large article.
Oh, you're starting to find my articles now, are you?
Yeah, it goes full bore into it. But
also, when you're 47 pages deep and you're like, I didn't realize I was going to read this much.
Right. But I'm in it, so I'm going to. So the speaker, and I'm going to keep names aside here because it goes into some deep stuff.
Yeah, to be fair, we're here for our topics and we're not really into the political side of it or anything like that. So,
but the topic of this discussion was called The Passions of Aisha. And I believe I'm saying that right, but it's the Islam language and I'm not versed in that. So apologies for mispronunciations. But Aisha is a infamous or famous female jinn in Morocco. It says not all jinns are known to have names, but she is one of them, perhaps the most well-known in the North African context. Her origins as a mythological creature are unclear. The speaker goes on to say she's seen a few different theories. One, that she was a slave woman in Sudan. Other, that she was an ancient Cargathian goddess. And then others have argued that she was actually a Moroccan woman who fought against the Portuguese colonizers. But says she is a very playful, vengeful, seductive, cruel, nurturing, and...
Dogs don't like talking about jinns. It's fine.
Yeah, no shit. Did you stop it?
No. Go ahead and carry on.
Okay. She's a very playful, vengeful, seductive, cruel, nurturing, and unpredictable. She possessed a number of people who struggle with their passions and their traumas. Ding, ding. Some of which are caused by her. She says she's going to, she kind of shows a vintage on the screen, but obviously I don't have it here. But apparently they have healers for that in Islam. Again, pronunciation, the Rika, and it's the same thing. Okay, Rika. I believe I'm saying that again. Sorry for pronunciations. Basically, they're kind of like seers, healers, medicine men, if you want to use the Western term for it. But she goes on to explain that she interviewed 27 women. And then she goes on to name the women, each of whom who have had their own distorted past, be it one kind of the same route as that Emma, not as sexual, but she grew up wanting to get married and all this, found a husband, or found a suitor, I should say, but was nervous about it because she had a jinn. And the jinn caused her uncomfortable. She would get bloated. There was a lot of things that happened. She would tend to go into another person almost. And the mother...
kind of almost opposite of, like... All right, carry on.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm listening.
No. I was
active listening.
Yeah. The mother believed so badly that she was infected by a jinn that she hired one of these healers and invited this speaker and her assistant to watch it. And she begins to describe everything that happened. And they do it, I guess the ritual that they performed is kind of like a bonding of the souls in a way. And how they started it was the guy reached out with a stick, touched the girl on the chest. They didn't say what kind of stick it was. I don't know if it was some special wood or something like that.
Probably.
Touched the girl on the chest, and the girl started having convulsions. And the jinn responded in a man's voice, saying that he cannot breathe, and that the guy is to stop it. Now, this is where it gets a little odd, because the healer, right then and there, said she's not infected by a jinn. It's all psychological. That she is scared about the marriage, so she's making this all up. Contrary to the mother be like, no, I see the jinn. I know the jinn. My daughter doesn't have a manly voice. She's talking in a dude's voice.
Right.
And
fair.
Yeah.
Logic.
Yeah. And the guy again goes, no, this is all because she's not happy in her life. Mind you, I say this is not the views of No Lights Paranormal or the people sitting at this table. And then proceeds to tell her to read the Quran, specific passages from the Quran every night. And the way he describes it, it'd be good if for someone that isn't either mentally ill or possessed. He said, do something for yourself that makes you happy. Because you are not happy with your life. This is the reason why you're going through this. Do something to make yourself relevant. Again, someone who is not possessed or has mental illness, that'd be great advice to give someone that is being lethargic or is going through something rough. Mm-hmm. Great advice. However, when you see someone that is possessed, possibly not the greatest advice to give.
Agreed.
And then told her to come to his clinic where he would charge her to get rid of the djinn that he just previously said he didn't believe in.
That's amazing.
So, needless to say, they ousted that dude, got another guy in there, and he said, yes, possibly she could be possessed by a djinn. I don't know. Haven't done this. Mind you, this is just one of the 27 that she went through. She could be possibly possessed by a djinn. I don't know. I haven't researched it yet. I haven't talked to her yet. He goes, but there are other healers in this group that just want people's money. And proceeded to say the first guy is probably one of those guys.
Yeah.
And at that point, she says she's going to stop talking about that person and go on to another person. I'm going to cut it short because there's 27 of them. Mm-hmm. Basic short notes is that all these women that were possessed by the djinn have had rough backgrounds. Nothing sexual.
It does, like violence, betrayal, loss, poverty.
Not even violence. Some of them grew up in a good household, but they have lost someone that they were close to, or liked someone that didn't like them back. Trauma. All these things
unfilled desires, lack of love,
etc., in a way, shape a young person into who they are as an adult. Mm-hmm. And this is where the article takes a very controversial turn. The speaker talks about the state of Islam, the country, not the religion, the country, and says that is the problem with it nowadays, because it's all infected by jinn. This is where I say it gets controversial because of what is happening in the world nowadays in that specific region. She said in her studies, most of the people that were affected by jinn were women. In her small research, I guess,
within the capacity of
the parameters
study.
Of what, yeah. So, because 27 she witnessed, she said she noticed more than just 27. No, she is not a professor of female studies, just because I see that look, Alex. However, she goes into talking about most of the women that she noticed come from poverty. They're now not in poverty. They're in a very wealthy to-do state in Islam, meaning for what we here in America call political terms.
Yeah.
Not meaning to get political with it, but that's what she said they're going with. And that these people that are infected by the jinn are now running the country. And that is the state of the country nowadays because it's ran by jinn.
So let me get this straight. Let me back up and get this straight. She believes, throughout the course of her studies, she believes that she has discovered that the reason that the state of Islam is in political distress, dire straits, whatever you want to call it,
disarray,
is because
jinn run the country.
The powers that be in the government are all possessed by jinn, meaning that jinn run the company.
Well, that explains our last 4 years.
Sort of.
That's
sort of
interesting.
She is saying that the jinn, because Islam has kind of changed, and mind you, these are her views, not mine, because Islam has changed over the years.
Well, yeah, we all have.
That the jinn are unhappy about that. Now, I did a little bit of research on the jinn, and the Islam's actually, I say Islam, I'm using the wrong terminology, and I apologize. They believe that the jinn are parallel to to this world. They're smokeless beings who do all that. However, they live in harmony with them. It's black magic, but they don't view it as that. Some view it as very, like that woman's mother, like, nah, my daughter's been touched by the black magic. Like, get that out of her. But yes, she is stating that the reason why Islam is the way that it is now is because the jinn have taken over. Not taken over, that's a bad word for it. But the jinn are infecting it in a way to where it is creating civil unrest because they are unhappy with the state of it.
But are not the jinn, quote unquote, possessing people because of that individual's own unrest?
One of the healers spoke into it, and this touches on your story a little bit, said that when you are angry, you open up for possession.
I do not disagree with that in any sense.
Right.
So I would say
if
any extreme emotion itself.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
He specifically talked about anger. So much like the youth of America at a certain point in time, they're angry with just how it is because they don't understand it. They can't wrap their head around it, or nobody's talking to them about how it is, or they think nobody cares about them. So that resorts in anger because now you're angry at the world because you don't feel like the world gets you. That opens up for possession. Now, mind you, that last part was a little bit me, but this is what that healer was talking about. That the state of Islam is angry. That's why the jinn are coming in, because it's opening them up for possession. And it kind of goes in with your story a little bit. The girl got angry, and it did something. When you get
anger, jealousy.
Not to quote Star Wars here, but when you get anger, you open yourself up for a lot of shit. And you make bad, irrational decisions. I know this because I've done it myself. We've all done it. And if you tell me you haven't, I'm going to call you a liar.
I mean,
plain and simple.
What I'll say, possession of any type. Now, for as long as I've been researching anything to do with paranormal, possession of any type has a multitude of triggers, the easiest of which to define or just to see for yourself is anger, fatigue, depression, any type of under the influence type thing, if you will.
Yes.
Those are all, they make it way easier for possession to become a thing.
Right. It's opening the door up, and there's a reason why they call liquor spirits, because it also opens up yourself to spirits of the other realm. But yeah, no, this is what I meant by the discussion of this. The dogs, guys, just it's an interesting discussion because upon looking up the stories for this, I couldn't find one that wasn't demonic.
Right. I mean,
and I was kind of going for a spiritual possession because my original thought for these kind of stories was people get possessed all the time, but they may not know it. You get possessed by emotions, anger, lust, jealousy. You get the 7 deadly sins, if you will. You kind of get possessed with that. Or even rabbit holing is a form of possession because now your brain is on that subject.
I mean, that's fair.
But all possession doesn't mean demonic.
Right.
In my opinion. Now, granted,
I've literally watched a friend change, if you will. Personally viewed spiritual possession before.
Yeah. I actually believe that every single one of us have. We just didn't realize it at the time.
And I believe that in most cases, unless you know what you're looking for, it would probably be pretty hard to identify.
Well, and here's a hot take. There are some people believe that the Holy Spirit possesses you. For Christianity. For people describe it as that, it's a form of possession.
I have.
Whether or not I agree with it is here
I've
or
heard
there.
it described that way as well.
But yeah, like they're possessed. Yeah, the holy rollers. They're possessed by the Holy Spirit.
I mean, let's be honest with it. You have certain sects of certain churches that literally make a big deal out of speaking in tongues.
Yeah, which is insane to me.
But I mean, if you're speaking in a language that you don't know, does that not lead one down the path that you could feasibly reconcile it as some kind of possession going on there.
Yes, and then no. Sorry, you hit on the trigger thing for me.
That's fine. And I wasn't really trying to like lay a finger on any certain
No,
thing.
I get
I'm
where
just
you're
saying,
going with
like, this is an example,
Yeah.
if you will.
But the whole term of speaking in tongues in the Bible was just referred to a different freaking language.
Yeah.
Like, they went to Germany and they spoke German. One of the apostles didn't speak freaking German. So God let them speak German for that. That's what they mean by speaking in tongues. It's not, it's not that.
That's fair.
That's just gibberish. I'm sorry. I will argue anybody who says they can. And I have an uncle who believes he can. So
listen, I just
But
go by what
I know where you're
church
going
people
with.
tell me. All right?
Well, I mean, I like I said, it's a little bit of a hot take for me, but I also get what you're trying to say because yes, in a way, God did possess the apostles.
If I saw it in
to be able to
person
speak.
and it was real and somebody was speaking a language that for sure that I knew that they did not speak, I would consider that some form of possession.
Well,
I probably wouldn't call it speaking in tongues, but I'd be like, how the fuck do you know fucking...
yeah. You can barely pronounce the alphabet. How do you know how to speak this?
I have witnessed someone speaking in tongues supposedly while they were Holy Spirit possessed in a church, and to me it was, all that love and spiritual happy feeling that you feel when you're in a church and you're surrounded by, your churchy people and everyone's praying and everybody's into it. And you believe that, that God is present and that God has, reached into the room and touched you or whatever the case may be. And they get real excited and they start dancing and waving their hands around and singing and praising Jesus. And speaking in tongues comes with that. And in the particular situation that I was in when I witnessed this happen, and honestly, I'm not knocking religion in any way. I believe that there is a God. This particular person blew my mind because watching them and their mannerisms and the way they were waving their arms around and the sound of this supposed speaking a language, whatever, to me, the whole thing was like, would you just fucking stop it and sit down because you're embarrassing yourself?
Yeah, I get it.
Like, I believe it was 100% just in the moment, feeling whatever way.
Feeling happy.
But not at all spiritual event.
Like I said, I had an uncle who thought he could speak in tongues. And he did it in the house one day, saying prayer, started doing it. And I immediately asked him right after because I had the same reaction, like, what the hell are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him afterwards, like, what'd you say? He goes, I don't know. I was speaking in tongues. So I was like, that's not speaking
not
in
the way that
tongues.
works.
Because in the Bible, it literally says you would know what you said. Anyways, get in back on the subject.
To be fair, one quick part that I wanted to touch on regarding that is the one quick thing that I did not say as I was skimming through some of the things that happened to, we'll call her Emma, was that she made it very clear that for the most part, despite the fact that she felt like something else was taking control of her sometimes, she was very aware and remembered every fucking thing that happened.
Which is odd.
Normally,
Because you don't.
you hear it directly the opposite in possession cases.
Well,
like she said to her, it felt like driving down the road in the back seat. She was completely cognizant and aware, couldn't do anything about it,
Just wasn't in control.
but literally remembered everything.
actually, that makes sense.
I think that, to be fair, I think that it kind of makes sense both ways, depending on how it's explained. You know what I mean?
Well, and two, it goes back to the person that is possessed. Do you truly believe them or not? But most people that say they can't remember stuff are the people that committed heinous crimes while saying they're possessed.
Yeah.
So,
And to be fair, maybe it's your mind that doesn't let you remember it.
That could be. You could have shut it out. It's tough to say if it's yes or no. Do I believe her? Kind of got no choice but to. But to me, that almost sounds like full-blown possession. Like she did say what she said. So, yeah, it could have been full-blown to where it's just like you don't have that blacked out part.
Right.
So.
Listen, You
And
two
also
know
she-
me very well, and my religion is very much my own, and I wouldn't be caught dead saying something like that. I'm like,
It's something
I don't
you
have to not believe in it or believe in it to be like, I'm not going to push that button anyway. You know?
I have researched a lot of religions in my time. One of the things I found most common in every single religion is that you don't do that.
There's
In every religion, they say, don't do that.
there's big red no buttons,
Yeah,
right? In every religion, there's a big red no button, and you don't push it no matter what religion you believe
Yeah.
in and what religion you're looking at.
Yeah. So no matter what you do, you don't do that.
You're like, hey, what's the worst thing I could do?
Yeah.
No, we're not.
Say that. But no, it's an interesting and controversial topic because not a lot of people like to talk about it. It makes them feel uncomfortable. I, however, like conversations that make me feel uncomfortable because it pushes me to a limit I don't know.
I agree with that.
It makes me think.
Yes,
It makes me think about things that I wouldn't otherwise think about. You know what I mean?
exactly.
To be
Yeah.
fair, one of the biggest things that I came into conflict after everything that I've said and everything that I've read and all the interviews that I've listened to and all the studies, research papers that I read, there's a correlation between, I feel like there's the same correlation between possession and mental illness as there is between science and the paranormal field itself.
Yeah.
As far as, to put it in the easiest way for me to explain, is there is a reason that my harshest skeptic and will throw out 90% of my own evidence.
Yeah.
Everything, and especially with technology nowadays, is working against you.
Yep.
Like, listen, if you ate a McDonald's fry and you rubbed your thumb on your passenger window and then took a picture and you saw a face in it, sorry, that's called matrixing. All right? It just is.
It's also called salt.
I don't know if half of you people just forgot what matrixing is and the way that the human mind works and makes up pictures just so that it recognizes something.
It almost takes me back to when I was learning about computers because, I'm old enough to know when computers first came out. The guy that was teaching me when Windows first came out, and it was going from MS-DOS to Windows. And he said, Windows is making everybody button pushers. So, yes, I do actually think people forgot how things actually work because they're so used to just click, got it.
Like, look, bro, that's not a face in the window.
Yeah.
That's the peanut oil from your McDonald's fries.
And
All
maybe
right?
it's a couple
Stop.
salt kernels.
Just quit it.
Yeah.
But the interesting part for me is where possession and mental health differs, and that I will say correlation of the two subjects on its own is I don't know which one to believe.
Well, yes.
Is there more going on that's paranormal, that's actually possession, that's just being diagnosed as a mental health thing,
I think
just so you can put
yes.
a word on it?
I think a little bit of both. I do believe that this is going to be a hot take.
Well, take it up. It's already a thick soda. We're having a good time.
I
here.
believe PTSD is a made-up word. I do believe it is some part of a real thing, but I think it's a thing doctors come up with because they don't know what to diagnose with it. They don't know how to describe what is going on. So I think it's PTSD. I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying I think they loop too much into it because they don't know where to go with it.
I'll agree with that.
I agree with that. I think, and to be fair, that's my biggest cause for concern, whether you're talking about possession, paranormal,
Yes,
mental health, whatnot, is be cautious about labels.
exactly.
Labels are just labels to try to help you understand something. They're not actually a definition.
Well,
They're just a label.
And that's also the other thing about possession and also mental illness is what do we define mental illness as? If you start acting different, do we automatically think you have a mental illness?
Not necessarily.
What I'm saying is mental illness to us is someone acting different than normal.
Okay.
Yet if you ask someone what normal is, they can't give you a fucking definition for it to
It's
save their life.
True.
So how do we define normal from mental illness? And if that's the case, how do we find mental illness from possession?
What I will tell you is that in all of my research that I have done on this particular topic, this is the most basic and simple form of what I've found. If you are of the church, it's possession. And to be fair, it literally could be DID, it could be PTSD, it could be whatever. But if you're of the church, especially, I don't want to point fingers, especially Catholicism or some of those way more old school hardcore religions, it's possession. It's nothing else.
Yeah.
If you're not, 9 times out of 10, well, they've got a mental illness.
Yeah.
And there has to be a gray line in the middle somewhere where
also
you can just say it. It's okay to say you don't know.
Yeah. And that's the problem is I think most people don't like not knowing things, or they don't want people to think they're, pardon the expression, stupid. So they come up with something just so out of the woodwork. Like, look, every single person that's disabled right now has no problem saying, I don't fucking know.
I say that at least 5 times a day. It's fine.
But they're, like you said about labels, some people are so quick to label something that they, one, don't know about, just so they don't have to fucking deal with it. I don't want to deal with it, so that's that.
Yep. I'll agree with that.
Well, welcome to how religion was started. Pre-monotheism.
Yeah. Correct. But there is something to be said, though, about the deceiver. If we're going the Christianity route, the devil, the deceiver. What's the quickest way to make someone believe they're not possessed? Yeah, you got a mental illness. You experienced trauma in the past. I'm not saying mental illness isn't real. I know it is. I've seen it firsthand. I know it's the person that had it wasn't clearly not possessed because I'm a paranormal investigator. I know the difference.
I have a pretty nasty anxiety disorder that is considered a mental illness.
Right.
I'm medicated. Thankfully, it works very, very well for me.
And you know when it hits.
Right.
But I do think a lot of people, God, I'm hitting a lot of hot takes today, fake mental illnesses.
Absolutely.
Because they want attention.
To be fair, we literally, and it's not just mental illness, right? Technically, if you're going to go on this weird wavy spectrum, we literally just read about a girl that faked possession, or, well, maybe she did not.
Right. Well, question is, did she know it? That's the thing.
Maybe she was just,
because clearly that girl has some issues, but that was a red flag. How old is she? No. Joking.
No, I mean, what I'll say is, in regards to that, right? Shit, I lost track of where my brain was at. Brain farted. This is something that when you start... All right, so as much as we're saying that keep your kids in bed for this one, let me explain something to parents of older children who have started to look around for things, answers,
find
wherever
themselves. I got you.
You know, I was sub 18 once. I started looking at paganism and alternative religions and things like that. You're in a digital age where information is at your fingertips, and you should probably look real hard at what you're doing before you just do it.
Yeah.
That is one thing that I preach to my son, because my son is an alternative person who's just he's of that age where he's got questions and he's looking for answers wherever it comes from, right? But don't uncork a bottle that you can't put the cork back in.
You ask questions on the internet, you end up a Pornhub. But no, you're exactly correct. We live in an age of information, and the information is readily available to where it wasn't to someone of our age.
Right.
Be careful what you look at. Don't read one website and then wholeheartedly believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Look at other things. Look at other articles. Look at the research shit.
In fact, I don't care what you're looking up and which stance you're trying to take. I would urge you to not only look up the websites that give you the information that you're looking for, but specifically look at websites and information that are contradicting those. to try to
Yeah.
understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can read it, and if you look at a person, a lot of times you can read that person and tell when they're just bullshitting to be bullshitting because they don't agree with you.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
I
But-
absolutely hate that.
But there are definitely like word pointer outers in paragraphs that will tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
So if you are reading an article and this person is just full of shit and they just don't believe what you believe, then move on to the next article. But at least look at the counterpoint of view to see where that counterpoint of view is coming from.
100% correct. I am a firm believer that everybody has their own opinions on things. Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got them. However, and this has helped me growing up and even in my adult life, when you have an opinion about something, look up the exact opposite of what you believe in, because you might just learn something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Be it good or bad, that's up to you.
Hell, a lot of times, most of the people I know, it makes their faith in whatever faith they have stronger.
Yeah.
I mean, we come to you sitting around this table at this podcast as 3 different people. Joe here is our resident Christian of the group. My wife is I would just refer to her as like a non-denominational God believer. All right. She's religious. She just,
Then you got the heathen.
then you got the closest you can get to Celtic pagan, right? Like,
Right.
but all of us can sit back and we can agree and talk about this kind of stuff. And I don't think Joe's wrong. In fact, I think everybody's right to an extent.
Not everybody. There's some people like,
To an extent.
what the hell? But, like the article that I had, she believed that Islam is in trouble because it's possessed.
That's
by
weird. I don't believe that.
It's weird. That's
All right.
that's a bit
I
different.
retract my
But-
previous statement. Not everybody's right.
Sometimes the oddball things make sense.
That's true.
Might be the sickness talking, but some of that made sense. But as far as possession goes, I didn't find too many spiritual possessions. When I was looking up, it was all demonic.
Yeah.
And
I will say that most of the spiritual possessions that I've ever come across, though, like, it's definitely one of those you have to find the right place that you're researching. Like, it doesn't
Right.
just come out and say spiritual possession. It just says, this happened while I was at this place. There's
Yeah.
a lot of those articles, but it makes it 10 times harder to find.
oh god,
a
yes.
million times harder to find, really.
Well, we even get it on the, like, say what you want about the TV ghost hunters, but even they get possessed there. Like, how many had to go out there because they had, like, hyperventilation and they were having an anxiety attack or something like that. And then they
Something.
get outside the building and they're like,
Yep.
I feel completely
Yeah.
okay now.
Well, hell, you can step away from he who we will not name that is nowadays everybody's heroes and go back to our OG heroes of Jay and Grant. I literally heard them do interviews on the radio before where they literally walked into a house and a 3-year-old little boy picked up a couch and threw it across the damn room.
Yeah.
Did hear that story?
Yeah.
Like, there.
Like, and to be fair, when they originally walked into that house, they were like, we don't really believe in possession either. Oh, well, I guess that's fucking real. Nothing like a flying couch to change your mind. It's fine.
I mean, he's not wrong. Definitely not wrong.
What I will say is that I do believe that mental health is real, and I do believe that possession is real. The hard part is finding that big gray line in the middle where they
Finding
both
evidence.
coexist.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much we can say against that or for it. So I believe one leads to the other.
Yeah.
So
So either way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit back and I'm say, I hope that you enjoyed our fucking ramblings this evening and our stories. I'm going to kick it over to my wife to tell you our socials. I'm going to say thank you for listening. We appreciate you.
socials.
Indeed. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
give
We
them
love
socials.
every single one of you are awesome and appreciated. Please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can find us at No Lights Paranormal on LinkedIn, No Lights Para on X, that's Para, No Lights Paranormal on Facebook. You can message us at nolightsparanormal@gmail.com.
Good night. We love you. Stay safe. Don't fuck with the Baba Yaga.
Yeah, just don't.